Start the year strong with a refresh of your most important gaming kit. SteelSeries' award-winning range of keyboards, mice, headsets, and gaming earbuds are industry-leading, and you can get 12% off your purchase when you use offer code SKILLUP over at steelseries.com. Click below or stick around to the end of the video to learn more. Gamers! Hello and welcome to Season 5 of This Week in Video Games. I absolutely cannot believe that we have already been doing this for 4 full years. When I started out doing this, I looked like this. And now I look like this. I'm not joking, by the way. I really do believe that if I grew a handlebars mustache and I tatted up, I would get those comparisons. Better than the Corey Feldman comparisons I keep getting, by the way. What is up with that? We look nothing alike. Anyway, we are back for another year of video games coverage, highlighting the biggest news, events, and releases, while trying to roast as many CEOs as we can along the way. We like to do what we can around here. This year is going to be the same as the previous years, to be honest. The format of the show has remained largely unchanged for the last 3.5 years, and I still like doing it, and you guys keep coming back to it, so I guess there's no reason to change things up too much. We are offering one upgrade though, and that's that This Week in Video Games, and all Skill Up content in fact, will be available on Spotify. They've recently made a big push into video, and now any creator can upload videos onto there and view them just as you would a YouTube video. Best of all, if you're a Spotify Premium subscriber, you won't get any mid-roll ads interrupting your viewing or listening experience, so that might be where you want to watch stuff if you're a premium subscriber. There's the whole back catalog of Skill Up reviews already on there, and like I said, all future reviews, previews, and episodes of the news show will go up there as well. I'll leave a link to the Spotify channel below, or you can just Google Skill Up on Spotify and then click follow. While you're there, feel free to drop a 5-star review too, since that's super helpful, and a big thanks to Spotify for inviting us to be a part of that. Now, this episode is going to go live at almost the exact same moment that the reveal of the Nintendo Switch 2 is rumored to be happening. I can think of no more fitting a way to start a new season of This Week in Video Games than uploading a video at the exact moment when Nintendo reveal a new console, meaning that we have to get to the story a full 7 days late. That would be absolute chef's kiss, but who knows, maybe the leaks and rumors are once again wrong. Either way, I ain't got no crystal ball, so for now, let's say we get stuck into the first big news story of 2025, which also just so happens to have been the last big news story of 2024. Man, things are going from bad to worse for Ubisoft. Last year we spent a huge amount of watch time covering all the struggles they've had, from Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown underselling, to Skull and Bones slinking its way out the door without any excitement, to Star Wars Outlaws bombing, and of course X-Defiant being shut down just a few short months after it launched. Things were so bad that it prompted Ubisoft CEO Yves Guillemot to announce a company-wide investigation into why games weren't hitting their desired quality bars or commercial performance. I did FedEx Yves Guillemot a mirror to aid in this investigation, but to this point he has not responded with so much as a thank you card, which I personally think is Trey bad manners. Anyway, we're getting sidetracked. Point is, Ubisoft is in serious trouble, and for a while now there have been rumors that Tencent are looking to acquire some or all of the company, with reporting that talks on that front became quite advanced in December of last year, but ran aground when it became clear that the Guillemot family wanted to retain control of things even after this acquisition. Good luck with that. So after that, everyone took a break for the holidays, and coming back in the new year, Ubisoft's C-suite are being very clear that nothing is off the table when it comes to the future of Ubisoft. In a market update note, Ubisoft announced that they had just, quote, appointed leading advisors to review and pursue various transformational, strategic, and capitalistic options to extract the best value for stakeholders, end quote. Now listen, that is not the sort of language you use when you want to dig yourself out of this mess by way of great video games that sell gangbusters. No, that is the language you use when you are preparing people for a sale of some or all of the business. Strategic and capitalistic options is not code for we're gonna release a bangin' Splinter Cell game, and extract the best value for stakeholders is hardly hinting at a Far Cry Blood Dragon 2, though they really ought to get on that, because if anyone's going to save Ubisoft right now, it's Rex Power Cult. Yves Guillemot himself said in the investor update that, quote, we are convinced that there are several potential paths to generate value from Ubisoft's assets and franchises, end quote. Something tells me he's not talking about movie adaptations and Funko Pops, but to be fair, the fewer Funko Pops in the world, the better. So all of this is very dire language that hints at a very uncertain future for the roughly 18,000 people currently working at Ubisoft. Doubly so because in addition to that, Ubisoft's leadership announced a €200 million cost-cutting initiative, which will surely involve more studio closures and job cuts. They also reported weaker than expected holiday sales, roughly €300 million below target, but they say that they will still break even this year, which to be honest is kind of surprising since Ubi have really got the shit kicked out of them this year, and I personally would have expected things to have slid into the red. Finally, Ubisoft announced that their flagship 2024 offering, which eventually became their flagship 2025 offering, was getting yet another delay. Assassin's Creed Shadows was meant to ship in the busy month of February, but it'll now arrive on March 20th. Great news for everyone, I think, considering that February was already stacked enough as it is, and now we'll have more than enough time to polish off Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 before getting ready for Monster Hunter on the 28th. Of course, Ubisoft aren't pinning all their hopes on Assassin's Creed this year, and that's why, and I'm not making this up, Ubisoft released another NFT game last year. And no, it wasn't that Grimoria Chronicles one that I've already roasted a bunch of times. It's a whole different one that I and no one else other than Steve Totillo of GameFile knew existed. He spotted it, so credit to him, because even Ubisoft themselves have done absolutely nothing to promote this game. Not a whisper about it on any of their official channels. It's called Captain Laserhawk the Game. Take a look at how shit this is. This is an NFT game released a week before Christmas. They really thought, yes, this is what the market wants and needs right now. What the fuck is going on over at Ubisoft? These people have lost their damn minds, and it's such a shame that so many people are probably going to lose their jobs over the coming months, while the people in the C-suite who greenlit garbage like this get to keep earning their obscene salaries. Anyway, I'm getting worked up. Let's keep moving, shall we? As I mentioned, that release was spotted by GameFile, and there was another big story that publication broke while we were on holiday. They found how much it costs to make a Call of Duty game, and spoiler alert, it's more than the GDP of your average small island nation. It turns out all this info was fully visible in publicly available court documents, and from them we can see the development budget for 3 Call of Duty games. It's the development budget for pre- and post-launch, and these numbers do not include marketing. So how much cheese we talking here? Well, Black Ops 3 was back in 2015. Activision spent a total of $450 million making and supporting that one game. $450 million. Fast forward to 2019 with Call of Duty Modern Warfare, and that cost the princely sum of $640 million for one video game. Finally, Black Ops Cold War in 2020 cost $700 million to make. $700 million for a Call of Duty game. And I know game development is hard and expensive, don't get me wrong, I am well aware, but I mean, $700 million for one Call of Duty game. That's just not making sense to me. Like, they're good games and all, sure, but I can't see that $700 million on screen. I just can't. I don't understand. And I would love to understand that. So if there are any Activision staff who'd like to explain this to me, please email me, because $700 million. Like, you can make the entire Quentin Tarantino filmography for less than half of that, and that shit lasts forever, whereas we forget about each Call of Duty game about 6 weeks after it launches. These numbers really do raise very salient questions about where all this is going. I mean, we were stunned to read the Insomniac leak that revealed that the budget for the next Spider-Man game is projected to be in excess of $300 million. The price of games can't go up much more than it already has, and you can't cram a Spider-Man game full of in-game spending without ruining it. So how does the AAA industry survive? Are they all just going to end up making gacha games? I'm half joking, by the way. That question really does keep me up at night. All right, let's pivot to some other news now, and I will say up front that I fully expect this entire block to be totally redundant the moment this video gets uploaded, because we're now going to talk about Nintendo Switch 2 leaks. So, over the break, there were a bunch of leaks claiming to reveal the design and dimensions of the Nintendo Switch 2. I'm not going to show them to you because I am not even joking when I say that even thinking of Nintendo's lawyers makes me break out into a cold sweat. But for real, if you haven't seen any of the leaks, just imagine a Nintendo Switch but a little bit bigger, and you're like 98% of the way there. If these leaks are accurate, the Switch 2 is going to be like an iPhone upgrade, where it looks almost identical but has a slightly bigger screen, stronger internals, and some AI bullshit, which in this case is probably going to be NVIDIA DLSS. Anyway, Dbrand was the first to post leaks claiming they had official dimensions of the Switch 2 and were producing cases for it ahead of the thing even being revealed. Other leaks popped up on social media with 3D printed versions of the Switch 2, which claimed to be using information provided by Nintendo. Most recently at CES in Las Vegas, a company by the name of Genki not only 3D printed a mock-up of the Switch 2, but put it on the show floor, leading to a bunch of excitement from people who thought that it was based on an official mock-up provided by Nintendo. Apparently, Nintendo's lawyers then spoke to Genki, and Genki then said that the mock-ups were generated unofficially and they were using just the leaks as a source of information. A likely story. So now you're all caught up on Switch 2 leak drama, and I'm almost certain that if you go to the Nintendo YouTube channel right now, they will have uploaded the actual reveal video for the Switch 2, and it'll probably look like the Resident Evil 4 chainsaw controller or something, I don't know. Sticking with handheld news a little bit longer, Steam are making good on a promise to roll out Steam OS to more hardware. At CES, Lenovo announced that their very large Legion Go handheld PC will now come in an optional Steam OS variant preloaded with the same operating system that powers the Steam Deck. You might be thinking to yourself, why would you want that? Wouldn't you want to stick with Windows since it's more flexible and more configurable? And yes, that is true. But have you used Windows on a handheld? Because if you had, you'd be like, yes please, death to Windows, Steam OS all the way, baby. Valve's OS is more restrictive, but it's also a billion times better to use on a handheld than Windows is, to the point where I personally am just noping out of the handheld Windows experience until Microsoft get their act together, which funnily enough is exactly what they're planning to do. Speaking to The Verge, a Microsoft rep revealed that Microsoft is looking to combine Xbox and Windows together for a better handheld experience. As someone who has used various Xbox dashboards over the year, that sounds more like a threat than anything else. No, things are actually much better on the Xbox dash front these days, and if Microsoft can bring a version of that to handheld PCs, I can see that providing a better experience than having to use Windows. But at the same time, you're probably going to be forced to buy games from the Microsoft PC store, and let's be real, absolutely none of us would be caught dead doing that. A quick lightning round to finish off. Shock horror, more Xbox games are going multi-platform, at least if reporting from Windows Central turns out to be accurate. They claim that Flight Simulator and Halo are both headed to PlayStation, and once we're controlling Master Chief with a DualSense controller, I think all of the confusion around Microsoft's will they, won't they approach to multi-platform publishing will end, and everyone will finally have to acknowledge that Microsoft is a third-party publisher, but also dabbles in the hardware market. Windows Central also said Hellblade 2, Age of Mythology, and potentially Gears of War 1 are all slated for PlayStation, so yeah, the dam is bursting. Some small leaks about Bungie's next IP. Right now it's called Project Gummies, and we know it exists because Bungie acknowledged as much when they announced the Layoffs last year. They said the project was being spun out into a separate and soon-to-be-formed PlayStation studio. According to The Game Post, that spin-out has now happened, and 40 former Bungie developers are now on that project at the as-yet-unnamed studio. As to what the game is, apparently it's a team-based competitive experience that draws inspiration from Smash Brothers, including stuff like percentage-based health and knockback mechanics. It is said to be targeting a younger audience, which would be a first for Bungie, and apparently it's been in development for 3+ years. A lot of very unusual stuff in the mix here, but Sony obviously have faith enough in this project to keep it alive, so hopefully there's something to it. Then again, Concord. So let's not pretend that Sony has a spotless track record when it comes to picking live service winners. Here's an interesting end to two stories that unfolded last year. You might remember that Take-Two was looking to divest its Private Division label. You know, that label that actually put out really great games, but because they weren't making GTA money, CEO Strauss Zelnick thought it better to shutter the studios and sell the IP. Good guy Strauss. Anyway, that happened. Totally separate from that, you might also recall the entire staff of Annapurna Interactive walked out the door, citing irreconcilable differences with management. They said they would be forming their own publishing label, and that's exactly what they did. And now it turns out they've secured the rights to all of the in-progress Private Division titles which were left twisting in the wind. The new label picks up Tales of the Shire, Kerbal Space Program, and a new unannounced game from Pokemon developer Game Freak. So it's kind of a happy ending, but sadly, Roll 7 still remains closed, and they should not soon be forgotten. Speaking of layoffs and closures, that issue certainly has not gone away over the break either. The final tally for 2024 games industry layoffs is now in, and a total of 14,600 people lost their jobs last year, up from 10,500 in 2023 and 8,500 in 2022. 2025 is wasting little time catching up to those numbers. Just this week, Meta announced they'll be trimming around 5% of their workforce, some of which will no doubt come from their VR business. Microsoft announced a number of layoffs too, with some of them affecting their gaming division. We don't yet have any details on that though. Toadman Interactive has been shuttered. It's largely been a support studio in the past, but more recently it put out out Immortal Unchained. Didn't get great reviews, and I guess it didn't sell too well either. Piranha Interactive recently put out MechWarrior 5 Clans, and the studio has announced a round of layoffs, which will see 38 people losing their jobs. A similar story at 11-Bit Studios, who cancelled a project they were working on while laying off 37 people. And Rocksteady has suffered further layoffs at the end of 2024, with cuts targeting their programming, art, and QA teams. So, that's all the bad news. Why don't we cover off some sales milestones to cheer us up? Stalker 2 is a good news story, for example. As of the 19th of December last year, the game was profitable, an incredible achievement for that studio given what they had to go through to make it. No doubt sales will have a very long tail owing to plenty of people waiting for bug fixes, plus there's 2 DLC expansions planned as well, so plenty more Stalker on the way. Marvel Rivals is anything but a flash-in-pan success, with the game hitting a new peak concurrent player count this week with the launch of the new season. 644,000 concurrent players just on Steam makes this an absolute smash hit for NetEase, one that is well and truly going the distance in an era when most live services belly flop out the gate and get wound up after 6 months. Hitman World of Assassination has hit a 75 million lifetime players milestone. That's the repackaging and remastering of Hitman 1, 2, and 3, including their much-loved roguelike mode. 75 million players is actually kind of crazy, to the point where I had to go back and double-check the press release, but yeah, it's accurate. A huge congrats to IO for that one. Very much looking forward to that Bond game they're working on. V Rising has now sold over 5 million units, giving Stunlock plenty of confidence and security to continue on to their next project while still maintaining support for V Rising. Stardew Valley just surpassed 41 million units sold, not bad for a game made by one dude. And EA Sports College Football 25 has now become the highest selling sports game in US history. I simply do not understand how the college version of a game is more popular than the Pro League version. Like, can an American in the comments section please explain that to me, because it genuinely makes no sense. So what's been announced or delayed while we've been on holidays? Well, let's start with the most promising reveal, the Blood of the Dawnwalker. Take a look at this.
Please. Please.
So this is the debut game from Rebel Wolves, which is a new studio founded by a very impressive lineup of former CD Projekt Red developers. It's going to be a single-player, open-world, narrative-focused action RPG where you play as a vampire, which seems like it should be a pretty played-out concept, but when you think about it, there really aren't that many vampire games, and that's a damn shame. Helming this one is Konrad Tomaskevitz, who was the game director of The Witcher 3 and a secondary game director on Cyberpunk 2077. Creative director on this project is Thomas's brother, Mateusz Tomaskevitz, who was game director on Thronebreaker and Gwent, and lead quest designer on Witcher 3 and its expansions. They're joined by several other impressive CD Projekt Red vets, but the longer I try to pronounce Polish names, the more likely I am to potentially offend someone, so I'll just stop right there. Just a cinematic teaser trailer for this one so far, which is a very CD Projekt Red kind of move, but this one is headed to PC, PS5, and Xbox Series consoles sometime in the future, with Bandai Namco publishing it. It is looking really nice, and with that sort of talent behind it, it's no wonder that it's generating a huge amount of buzz already. While we're traveling around the world, that's what Xbox is also planning to do when it holds a developer direct presentation later this month. That one is happening next week on Thursday, January 23rd, and promises deep dives into 3 upcoming games we already know of: South of Midnight, Claire Obscure Expedition 33, and Doom Dark Ages. But it sounds like they also have a surprise up their sleeve too, as they're teasing a visit to a, quote, surprise location to see another studio's brand new game, end quote. Word around the traps is that it's going to be a Japanese developer, but we won't have to wait long to find out. The Consumer Electronics Show happened while we were away, and aside from a bunch of new GPUs, new PC gaming handhelds, and a 3D printed Switch 2 model that was cobbled together from a bunch of leaks, we got a handful of PlayStation screen adaptation announcements? Yay, question mark? During Sony's CES presentation, they devoted the tail end of it to talk about how successful their film and TV shows have been doing. They even pulled Neil Druckmann up on stage to debut a new trailer for The Last of Us Season 2 and announced 3 new projects. The first one is a Ghost of Tsushima anime series, which is called Ghost of Tsushima Legends. Yes, it is based on the online multiplayer mode that Tsushima got post-launch, which is, to be honest, fantastic. Love that. This one is kind of being taken care of in-house, with Sony's anime studio Aniplex taking care of production and Crunchyroll taking care of distribution, and it's due for release sometime in 2027, so plenty of time for them to cook on that one. The second thing they announced was a film based on Horizon Zero Dawn, which is a production at Sony's Columbia Pictures. I know what you're thinking. Didn't they announce a Netflix series based on Horizon at one of those press conferences a while back? The answer is yes, but that project was canned and so now Sony are taking another swing aimed at the silver screen instead of your iPhone. Anyway, no date for the film yet, but it's in the works. Man, isn't it interesting how transparent the film industry is about the projects people are working on? It must be nice to know things. The last thing Sony announced was, and I swear this isn't a joke, a film adaptation of Helldivers 2. You know, the video game that is essentially an unofficial adaptation of Starship Troopers. This is like the Indiana Jones to Uncharted to Tom Holland Uncharted journey all over again. Anyway, no date for this one either. And you know what? There's probably a bunch of Helldivers players who have never seen Starship Troopers, so there's every chance that Sony's plan is just crazy enough to work. And while we're on adaptations, I might as well mention that Secret Level, the Prime Video series where Keanu Reeves plays as an Armored Corps pilot, and a bunch of other episodes also happened, I guess, it was renewed for a second season. Amazon reckons Secret Level was the most watched animated series debut of all time, which is pretty massive when you consider they have shows like Invincible and The Legend of Vox Machina and Batman Cape Crusader. Showrunner Tim Miller has been out there saying they've talked to literally every publisher about getting the rights to every big video game series for the first season, so it'll be really interesting to see who agrees to come on board for season 2 now that the show is a success. This is also a chance for Microsoft to correct that colossal blunder and give people the Doomslayer Master Chief crossover that they declined to make. Imagine being in the pitch meeting for that and saying, "No thank you, we'll pass." I bet you any money it was the same person that greenlit that goddamn Halo TV show. A couple of cancellations now to finish. The studio behind the goated Power Wash Simulator has said that they are no longer moving ahead with the VR version of the game, with the CEO saying job security is a bigger priority for them. They said the VR team was working to develop for a platform that was costing them more than it would feasibly make back in sales, and they've reassigned that time to fill a bunch of open positions on other projects. Honestly, a good move if it means fewer layoffs for them, but also a pretty dire indictment on the state of the VR industry. Speaking of the dire state of VR, Meta has ended sales for the Meta Quest Pro, which is the high-end business-focused model of the Quest. With the Quest 3S coming out late last year, it seems they're focusing more on affordability and getting VR into the hands of more people, which seems like a smart idea if you want to take steps towards not losing billions and billions of dollars each quarter on VR, but hey, what do I know? So what came out while we were away? Well, here's a weird one to kick things off. Freedom Wars Remastered is the re-release of a previously Vita-exclusive Monster Hunter-like sci-fi game that a bunch of Vita sickos were very excited about. Bandai Namco picked this one up from Sony in order to remaster it for PC, Switch, and PlayStation consoles, and it's landed at a fair OpenCritic score of 72, which seems about right for this sort of cult game. Here's what RPG Site had to say about it when they scored it an 8 out of 10, one of the highest scores of the bunch. Quote, "At its core, Freedom Wars is still very much the same game as the PlayStation Vita original, warts and all. It has the same frustrating pacing, the same story that, while conceptually interesting, maybe doesn't fulfill on that promise in practice. As fun as the high-speed action combat can be, it's still very limited in what you can actually do, and the scope of missions and the areas they take place in certainly betray the game's history as a handheld title from a decade prior. Still, even if it was merely a time capsule, I'd still be glad that Freedom Wars got to be remembered. It's a real treat then that this remaster has done an admirable job to polish up a game that for many Vita fanatics was the high point of the system's life," end quote. The big new release we mentioned before the break was Dynasty Warriors Origins, which comes out this Friday, but reviews have already dropped. This one sees the return of the 1 vs 1000 brawler and reimagines it for a new audience, and it's sitting at a strong and respectable 82 on OpenCritic. GameSpot had one of the more reserved reviews, scoring it a 7 out of 10 and saying, quote, "It's a marked improvement on that game in almost every area, utilizing modern technology to expand upon its hack and slash core while implementing a more considered and action-oriented approach that enhances its exorbitant combat. Longtime fans are likely downtrodden by its minuscule roster and lack of co-op, and the story has a habit of clogging up the game's pacing with too many redundant conversations, but these shortcomings mostly fade into the background once you're entrenched in the heat of battle," end quote. IGN seemed much more impressed with this one, scoring it a 9 out of 10. Here's what they had to say, quote, "It doesn't just have the largest amount of enemies the series has thrown on screen at once, it also deepens its combat, improves its storytelling without getting in the way of the action, and provides a healthy amount of replayability and post-game content, all while looking better than ever. Your amnesiac hero is still a bit too much of a blank slate at times, but the impressive ensemble cast made this story sing as I grew to care about the characters around him, big and small," end quote. Speaking of amnesiacs, if you've played Donkey Kong Country Returns before, hopefully you've completely forgotten everything about it, because it seems like the Switch re-release Donkey Kong Country Returns HD is more or less exactly the same thing. It's still coming in at a strong 78 on OpenCritic though. Nintendo Life gave it a 7 out of 10, saying, quote, "Donkey Kong Country Returns HD is a fine fine way to play the 2010 original, but it's also lacking any real reason for fans to double dip beyond waggle-free controls. It's less of a remaster and more of a port, end quote. On our team, Ed was actually playing a bit of this over the break, and he says he can definitely back up the no-frills feel. It was especially clear because last year he set up his Wii again for some bizarre reason and replayed the original version as part of a nostalgia trip, which only highlights just how little has changed since the new release. Ed says it's still a pretty good game, a little more difficult than people might expect, but it's no Tropical Freeze, so make a beeline for that one first. One thing that has changed quite drastically is the Hyperlite series. Hyperlite Drifter was a well-regarded single-player indie action RPG from a while back, which had a 16-bit style like a SNES Zelda meets Diablo thing. Hyperlite Breaker is the next game from that team, but it's very, very different. It's now a co-op, class-based 3D roguelike, which has just launched into early access. Now, it's only been a little while since that release, but the Steam reviews for this one are mostly negative, with around 500 reviews at the time of writing. User reviews seem to mainly talk about the combat and progression being extremely unforgiving, as well as some technical issues. Steam user Rio has around 3 hours clock summed it up by saying, quote, "There's potentially a really good game here, but at the moment I can't recommend it due to a number of strange design choices, balancing issues, and an overall lack of polish and optimization. A lot of what this game has to offer in its current state can be considered obtuse and unintuitive," end quote. Austin has been playing this one quite a bit actually, and here's what he had to say. Go for it, Austin.
Right, Hyperlite Breaker, it's a rough time so far. This is a roguelite / extraction game, and when playing solo, I found it ridiculously difficult to the point of being borderline unplayable. It's asking to be played like a fast-paced action game, but with such crazy mob density, and even common mobs able to delete you in just a handful of hits, alongside poor telegraphing and annoying animation locks, you end up having to play very sheepishly, unable to properly leverage the many combat tools available to you. It's fared a bit better in co-op as enemy aggro is spread more evenly, but it isn't enough to remedy the game's problems with visual clutter, stiff combat, and overly punishing systems. On a broader note, it also seems to lack the vision that made Heart Machine's previous games so special. It just doesn't really meet the quality bar we've come to expect from the studio that brought us Hyperlite Drifter and Solar Ash. I'll admit, it's kind of growing on me as I get to grips with its pacing, but on the whole, my time with it so far has been defined more by frustration than fun.
Thanks, Austin. Definitely a very early access game by the sounds of things, though the devs are being very active in responding to reviews and taking all this feedback on board. Let's hope they can turn things around. So what's coming out this week? Well, things are looking a little light right now, but we're taking that as a bit of a good thing considering we're about to get absolutely demolished with massive games in February. We were just talking about Dynasty Warriors Origins, and that one drops this Friday, January 17th. A day after that, Donkey Kong Country Returns also releases. Joining them is Bright Memory Infinite. Remember when Xbox showed off this impressive looking first-person combat game as a showcase a little while back? Well, if that didn't convince you to buy an Xbox, no worries, because it's now coming to iOS and Android on Friday too, so there you go. That's actually it for this week, but next week we're getting some decent stuff. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth makes its way to PC on the 23rd, and hopefully that one works a little better than Final Fantasy XVI did on its PC launch, because that was not great. Guilty Gear Strive continues to be one of the most impressive looking 2D fighting games out there, and that's getting a Switch port arriving on Thursday, 4 years after it was initially released, courtesy of Bandai Namco. Speaking of Bandai Namco, they're also releasing a brand new IP on Thursday, Sinduality Echo of Adaah. This one's an interesting one. It's another attempt from a big Japanese publisher at the multiplayer PvEVP thing, sort of like Capcom's Exoprimal. This is a third-person extraction shooter where you pilot a mech, explore levels to collect resources, while surviving both hazards and other players. It's going to be available on PC, PS5, and Xbox consoles, and yeah, I don't really know how this one's going to go, to be honest. These games live and die by their player bases, of course, so keep an eye on those launch numbers. It's had a few beta tests already, but Steam charts indicate that the PC test was about as popular as Concord's PC beta, so take that as you will. We talked about a cult Japanese PlayStation game in the last segment, so here's another one for you, Tokyo Extreme Racer. It's launching onto PC Early Access on the 23rd of January. This one is an all-new entry in an arcade street racing series that takes place on Japanese freeways, and it got pretty big during the PlayStation 2 and Dreamcast era. It disappeared not long after that generation of consoles wrapped up, and it's now looking to make a comeback. You know what else is making a comeback? All those old Star Wars games, thanks to Aspyr. Last year saw remastered re-releases of Battlefront Classic and Bounty Hunter. Next Thursday, we're getting Star Wars Episode 1 Jedi Power Battles. Look Look, I don't remember this one being particularly good, but I'm sure it's a nostalgia play that'll get a few people in. Beyond quality of life improvements, Aspire are adding new playable characters too, the most important of which is Jar Jar Binks, which I'm sure will make everything about this release worthwhile. Looking forward to seeing TikTok clips of him getting absolutely shreked by Darth Maul, just as it should have been in the movie, really. You know, you really wouldn't expect any developer to be releasing games over the New Year period, but there was one that got released on the 3rd of January, and it looks pretty damn cool, so put this on your radar. This is a game called Beyond Citadel, and yes, it is an anime game that Ed brought to my attention, but wait, come back. It's also a retro first-person shooter throwback that takes design inspiration from those weird 2D sprite shooters from the 1990s like LucasArts' Outlaws. Remember that one? Now, a lot of boomer shooters out there, of course, but the thing that sets Beyond Citadel apart is the complexity of its gunplay, with every gun having unique actions you need to do in order to reload and ready them, and your gun can jam or run out of bullets if you do things incorrectly, or do something as dumb as drop all of your ammo magazines. Alright, now that I've said the words anime and gun jamming, I realize this game isn't going to be for everyone, but it does currently have an overwhelmingly positive rating on Steam and a free demo as well, so if you think you might be the kind of weirdo that's picking up what this game is putting down, definitely give it a look. You can find a link to it over on our Steam curator page, which also has links to all of the other put this on your radar stuff we've recently covered. I'll leave a link to all of that below the like button. Sort of free stuff time now, and hopefully you were online enough during the holidays to grab all the stuff Epic was giving away every day, because they gave away a lot. It was nuts. They've now returned to their regular weekly schedule, and the game currently on offer is Turmoil, which is a satirical, historically based strategy game based on the US Gold Rush. That's available until this Friday, when it'll be replaced by Escape Academy, which is a nice little escape room game with Harry Potter vibes, designed by people who supposedly make real-life escape rooms too. This one got a good reception when it was first realized, 80 on OpenCritic, very positive on Steam, so well worth picking up if you want some puzzling action. You can even do co-op with a few friends, which is nice. Over on PlayStation Plus, their monthly freebies for January are now live, and wouldn't you know it, Warner Brothers are giving away Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, because Lord knows no one wants to buy it, and they want to ship as many microtransactions as they can before they eventually shut the game down. Joining it is Need for Speed Hot Pursuit Remastered for PS4, which is worth playing to remember how good this series used to be, and wondering aloud what the hell EA is doing with it now. And finally, the very clever Stanley Parable Ultra Deluxe is also free to PS Plus members this month. If you only play one of these games this month, make sure it's this one, worth it even if you've already played the original. Some notable releases on Apple Arcade this month that are definitely worth mentioning. The first is a new entry in Koei Tecmo's Three Kingdoms strategy game, which certainly has a fairly devout following at this point. Joining it are two more Square Enix RPGs, a remastered version of Final Fantasy I and Trials of Mana, which I'm told is one of the best games of the Mana series, but it was a Japan-only Super Famicom release until it was fully remade in 3D in 2020. These come on the tail of those two Final Fantasy IV remakes released for Apple Arcade in December of last year. Over on Prime Gaming, they've announced another slew of games to be given away during January. Some highlights include gold codes for BioShock 2 Remastered and SteamWorld Quest, which are available right now, as well as Deus Ex Game of the Year Edition and Blood West later this month. They'll also be giving away epic codes for Zombie Army 4 and Super Meat Boy Forever later in the month, as well as the big one, Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader? Available right now. We'll remind you when those other games become available, so please, come back, please. Have you hit the subscribe button? You should hit the subscribe button. You should do that. Let's do the Feelgood Story. Our Feelgood Story for the week is almost an annual tradition at this point, because it's basically impossible for an awesome Games Done Quick event to go down without it producing legendary moments. If you don't know what Awesome Games Done Quick is, it's an event aimed at raising money for charity, and it's all about speedrunning, but increasingly the bar is being raised by people who are not only able to speedrun, but they're able to put on a bit of a show while doing it. Chuckles825 is a good example. He was doing a crazy taxi speedrun, and in order to avoid the copyright strikes associated with the game's licensed music, he did this run while backed by a live band who were commentating his run as they sung. Take a listen.
There is a chain that's never broken. Do not a story, it's never true. Speedrun and lose time, every stats is split. Simple way as previous trend went. Comes around, well it goes around. Nothing changes cause it's all the same.
My favorite event though was courtesy of Dr. Dude, a guy who was doing an Elden Ring run using a saxophone controller that would produce a delightful doot sound whenever he entered an input. This is him fighting the fire giant. Enjoy.
One of my favorite parts about this fight is just how quickly you break the leg on this. I'm trying really hard. I'm so sorry. No.
God bless Awesome Games Done Quick, a great event for a great cause. Be sure to check out more of the VODs if you're at all interested, and don't forget to kick in a few bucks if you can spare it, because all that money does go to charity. Alright, ladies and gents, that's it for me for the week. We are glad to be back at it, and if you're glad to see us back, then we'd love it if you could drop the video a like to give it a little nudge in the algorithm. We always appreciate that. If you're new around here, then welcome, and don't forget to subscribe and ding that notification bell. We've got a few previews going up over the next week or two, so do look forward to those. And then, of course, the madness of February hits and all hell breaks loose. Can't wait for that. For now, thanks for watching, and a big thanks to this video's sponsor, SteelSeries. 2025 is going to be a pretty huge year for video games, making it the perfect excuse to upgrade your setup. So if you're in the market for a new keyboard or mouse or headset or whatever else, be sure to check out the kit from this video's sponsor, SteelSeries. SteelSeries products are industry leading. You don't have to take my word for it. Go look up reviews and you'll see that in every category, from mice to keyboards to headsets and beyond, SteelSeries stuff racks up awards left, right, and center. With a mix of functionality, quality, and reliability, SteelSeries has cemented an enviable reputation, and I'm very proud to have them as a channel partner. SteelSeries never rest on their laurels though, meaning they're always updating and improving their lineup while also making waves in all new categories. The biggest recent release was their Arctis Nova earbuds. I've been using these since they dropped and I absolutely love them. The best thing about them is that they're a pair of earbuds that can work with pretty much any device, including a PS5 console. That's because it has a dedicated 2.4 GHz dongle, which massively expands its compatibility, but also its reliability in gaming scenarios. You don't have to use that though, since it also has Bluetooth, but you can actually use these two connection types at the same time, switching seamlessly between gameplay and voice calls on your phone by having your earbuds connected to two devices at once. Combined with great ergonomics, fantastic battery, noise cancellation technology, and premium sound, the Arctis earbuds have made a really big splash and are getting excellent reviews all round. SteelSeries also recently refreshed their flagship keyboard. The Apex Pro TKL Gen 3 is genuinely the best keyboard I have ever used. You don't understand how good it feels until you experience it for yourself. The key presses feel like nothing else, while also delivering the fastest actuation response time of any keyboard on the market. It is literally the world's fastest keyboard, no joke. I love it. Outside of that, there's always SteelSeries' award-winning Arctis Nova Pro wireless headset, and that is the best gaming headset money can buy. You see the theme here, right? Whatever category SteelSeries enters, they crush it. And like I said, please don't take my word for it. Go and look at reviews for this stuff. You will see what I mean. Best of all, they're offering any viewer of this channel a special 12% discount when you use offer code SKILLUP at checkout. That's steelseries.com for 12% off when you use offer code SKILLUP at checkout. No strings attached. Thanks very much to SteelSeries for sponsoring the video, and a big thanks to you for watching it.